just to tell you what's going to happen now, I'm going to invite our speakers, Karin and Katrin, to the stage as well. And we're going to have a panel discussion. This is where you can ask your questions. Also, anyone on Skype, hello, not Skype, Zoom, hello. Hope you're still with us. I hope you're adding your questions. Yep, okay, I'm getting an indication that there's some questions coming through as well. So without further ado, let's welcome our speakers back to the stage. Yeah, Lisa? So, and I'm going to give Lisa a chance to introduce herself. I'm going to kick off with a question for her. And this is actually also a question for Karin and Katrin as well. So this is the same question to all of you. So there was the great point made a moment ago that AI is not evil. And it does seem that there are often two quite polar opinions on this. Some people, maybe people who are not so closely involved with AI, are very scared of it and do tend to see the worst and do think that this is evil. And then, of course, we know that there are another half of people who think that AI is the silver bullet that will solve every single problem, and it's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is, two quite diverse opinions. And my question is, how can we possibly try to bring opinions back into a middle ground? So educate the public, as well as practitioners, as well as business leaders and so on, whose companies are using AI. How do we educate them back into this middle ground where maybe the discussion can be a little bit more productive? I hope this is a good question to start you off, Lisa, and hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a great initial question, and I would like to follow up actually on Karin's talk, because I think the essence in it is trustworthiness, and that humans trust in artificial intelligence systems. And in order to trust these systems, of course, AI systems are built on a life cycle driven by data. We also need to know about the quality of the data in order to measure the trustworthiness of the decisions made by these systems, because of course the algorithms use a lot of training data, as we heard before, but it's not only about the bias in the data, it's also about the quality of the data. I think this extends the notion a bit, and I think I will comment on this in a bit.
Okay, fantastic. Any other thoughts?
I think awareness raising. Is it on now?
There we go, that sounds better. Ah, here, microphone.
Oh. Okay, I think awareness raising is very important to inform people about trustworthiness, about your product. I'm, as you know, coming from the law perspective, and here information is very important in all fields. When you inform somebody, then you also informed consent, so to say, and therefore you need a lot of awareness raising before information sheets and so on. People are interested in AI, and I think they really will read these papers. And so I think it's important to give them the information that they can understand it, and they can understand your words and AI systems as far as possible.
Yeah, and also there's still a lot going on in science. So especially in the last 2 years, I think many things happened, and this awareness is already risen, but it's still far from that everyone knows about it. And also there's a lot of research about how to measure this trustworthiness and how to measure bias. And there's still a lot ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and we've got some more thoughts for Lisa, so I'll give you the microphone back. And by the way, if anyone's already ready with the question, just pop your hand up and Verena will come to you with the microphone. So Lisa, over to you.
Thanks. Also in terms of research, because we have some very interesting 2 research projects at SECH, AI at Work and Teaming AI, which actually takes up the topic and tries to answer also the research questions, how can humans and AI systems, if there are already systems, collaborate together. And I think this is a really important topic, because in order to make the systems work, humans need to trust the system and work with it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so anyone in the audience want to be brave and go first? Or else? Yeah? Perfect. We have to, by the way, we have to pass the microphones like this because of, you know, that big elephant in the room, Corona. There's no passing microphones around. So we're playing it very safe here.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lotte Schatzelmeier, and I'm no technician, but a consultant. And I have a question for Professor Brückmuller. Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting to hear about the ethics and the human rights and the constitutional aspects, and furthermore. But my question regards competition. AI is a product which in the end is globally used, or systems can be globally used. And are there also any approaches from international perspectives and organizations like OECD, UN, or World Trade Organization, which regards the level playing field aspects of it? Do you know anything regarding that?
I know from a working group at the United Nations, but I don't know more about it. I'm sorry, because I think they are still working on papers. As far as I know, the European Union, the first organization who works on this paper about competition, about trustworthiness, and I think the EU is the first one in this field. But I can go through the legal documents, and I can go through the home pages and can look for that more deeply. So maybe I can find some working groups, and then you can write me an email, and then I will answer to your email. Hopefully I find something, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry at the moment.
Maybe we can forward this question, and I will give the Zoom audience also a voice.
Okay, we have here Ankita Puntolia. I hope I spelled it right. She's a student here at JKU, and she's asking, is there a legal framework to avoid AI bias?
You mean if there is law or norms?
I guess that was what she was meaning.
You have this constitutional norm that it's not allowed to discriminate somebody, which at least is to avoid bias, but I know it's quite broad to say non-discrimination. There are not really law which is more detailed as far as I know, but also criminal laws, as you're not allowed to discriminate somebody, but there are a lot, as far as I know, a lot of lex artis, a lot of standards which tell how to avoid discrimination. From a legal perspective, it's always discrimination.
Okay, where would we find these standards, for example, if we would be interested in that?
Ö-norm, DIN-norm, ISO norms, and so on. Maybe you know one, a special one?
No, not such official ones, but I know that Google, for example, has a guideline about what to do to avoid that bias. So how to measure, how to evaluate. And if you Google for this, then I'm sure you will also find it.
Okay, thank you for your answers. I have one more from the Zoom audience. It's from Edith Juhasz. How do you see the role of governments and the EU in the spread of AI? How do you see the chance of AI making government activities more transparent for citizens?
Question to me?
Everyone wants to be a law student today.
I have to ask, what do you mean with government activities to citizens? Did I understand right? Do you mean administration or?
We will wait for her.
So maybe in the meantime, some European cities, I think Amsterdam and Helsinki, also have since some weeks a homepage where citizens can inform themselves about where algorithms are used in the public So that's quite interesting, and also helps to explain and to make more transparent what is used where.
Yeah, I think Amsterdam is doing this as well, and there's a list of companies there. I want to, while we're waiting for clarification on this question, then I want to bring back to the topic of bias. Of course, as we've discussed, comes from the data quality, and I wondered if Lisa has some input onto how we can, whether there have been any efforts to standardize how we measure data quality and how we measure bias, and whether perhaps through her work she knows of any automated approaches that have been tried.
Well, first, I'll try to get the link from bias to data quality, because I think it can be seen as one aspect of data quality. I really like the definition by Daniel Kahneman about, he calls bias systematic error. And although he refers to the bias in the thinking, maybe you've heard of thinking fast and slow. And I think this description can likewise be used for the data, because the issue with when you train your AI algorithms on huge amounts of data, if you get some systematic error, the system will recognize this as pattern and learn from it. And therefore, I also think that data quality is an important aspect, because data quality is not one concept. It's called a multidimensional concept. So you refer to specific things like the data needs to be complete, it needs to be in time, accurate, and so on. And so I think the data quality topic is really important to be considered in its entirety. So not only the bias, but also, like, for example, the completeness, that there are no missing values in your data. And also in one of my projects at SSCH, we deal with Voestalpine Stahl GmbH, and we have a lot of industrial data there. And also, for example, if sensors introduce missing values over time, this can create a lot of bias for your AI systems. So I think this is a good example for systematic errors in your data that comes from industrial data, and especially if the data is collected historically, then in recent years, when people come to us and say, okay, can we do some data science project where we analyze this data? The data was not intended for this use. So this is also an important concept in the data quality literature. And I think there should be more awareness for data quality, specifically in AI projects.
Yes, amen to that. Do we have some more questions for the audience, or a clarification of the Zoom one? Oh, okay, and then we've got two more, so then you and you. So do we have the Zoom question clarified yet, or? No, okay, then Verena.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask Ms. Brückmuller, when you were talking about ethics, you talked about respect human autonomy, and then you talked about protecting humans. Taking the example of autonomous vehicles and collision avoidance systems, basically they work when the human fails to react to an accident, and in order to take action, it requires to take the freedom of the human driver away in order to protect it. So as a matter of ethics, it has a contradiction, because it doesn't have to respect human autonomy in order to protect humans. So how is it going to be solved? Because in future of the AI, many more decisions are going to be made with AI, and most of them, when you want to protect something, you have to take the freedom away.
Yes, you're right. and that's really the problem. The question you ask is the big question. in ethics, and I have to, so nobody knows at the moment the solution. We don't have any solution, and exactly that's the problem why we don't have any law for that. And that's exactly the problem, that you as developers don't know how to develop the algorithm. Should the algorithm decide to kill or not? Should it give it back to the driver? So that's exactly the ethic problem. And also the ethic commission in Germany, and also I think they're talking also in Austria about it. They say every human life has the same value. And in this moment, it's, so to say, the problem which is not easy to solve. But when you say that one principle is more or less prioritized, when you say, okay, you say freedom, then you can say, okay, you have to decide. When you say you prioritize that there is no harm, that there are people, that there are no dead people, or only one person dies, not a group of people, then you have to say, so to say, the second principle, less harm. So it depends on the prioritization. And this is at least after a discussion with all stakeholders, interdisciplinary approach, and then somebody has to decide. Maybe it has to be the legislator, but the legislator are now waiting for an answer of people are working in ethics. So the question you ask is the big problem at the moment, and that's why a lot of developers are afraid in autonomous industry to say, okay, we decide in this or in this, so to say, in this way, or this damage, or whatever you want to say here. And exactly that's the problem. And when we have trust in the system, and we have, that's my opinion, when you know as a driver, or as a passenger, or whatever, when you know that the car can hit you and that you die, and there is the transparency, then we also will accept it, as we also will accept it at the moment when we are on the road. Somebody can die, somebody can be insured, and maybe it's not so important to prioritize or to say that's the solution. Maybe we say it should be transparent, or that the buyer knows, the person who buys the car, that he knows his life more or less is safe. Then we will find a solution. When we say transparency is the most important principle, because we accept cars on the street, we accept that people on the street, and maybe we also accept it then when we have autonomous cars. But we need time. That's the one thing. We need information for the society. We need the acceptance of the society for the system, and therefore we need this transparency. That's my opinion. I know there might be other ways and other opinions, but at the moment I think transparency is the most important one to solve this problem. And then also maybe the legislator can say, okay, when you develop the algorithm, then it can decide whatever the algorithm wants or decides in that moment, as also human decides. Can happen that that the car drives into the group. And there's also a quite interesting legal point. As a driver, from the criminal law perspective, as a driver, it doesn't matter if you hit the group or the young person. You're always without criminal sanctions, and that's I think an important point, and maybe that should also be for AI for the developer.
Thank you. And for Mrs. Strasser, when we talk about humans, we talk about bias, and you said that we are all biased somehow, and the definition of bias is based on a reference. us as humans, we are conscious. How can we decide this reference in order to say, okay, I am biased, or I am biased this way, or I am biased that way? You know, it's a bit clouded, the concept of human being biased. Can you explain it a bit more?
I will try. So it's it's sometimes the first impression you have from someone. So when, for example, when you're introduced to a woman and then she says, yeah, I'm doctor in, I don't know, computer science, then you maybe think, oh, I never thought she's a computer scientist. And it's like these small things. It's I mean, it's not that bad if you think that, but it's just in our brains. So at least in our culture, we are used to that. Yeah, the mother takes care for the children and stays at home, and yeah, so that's things that are just in our minds. And I pay attention myself whenever I think such things. So just to that I detect it myself. So then I think, okay, there is no reason that she's not a doctor in computer science, because why not? So basically paying attention. So whenever you assume something, then think about this, why did I think that? And yeah, you will probably realize that this happens quite often. And I wouldn't say there is a standard. I would just say that we think of different people differently just because of, yeah, whatever their gender, their looks, their age. Yeah, so there is not this normal person or whatever, but we think different of different people. Does this somehow answer the question? And can you maybe rephrase it?
When you talk about, thank you. When you say, okay, when someone asks me that they are computer science, I'm shocked. It's like when you say, okay, a 45 years old is a professional football player. It's improbable. So the reaction that the other person shows, yes, might be impressed by that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are biased, because, you know, when you say, okay, I'm 20 years old, I'm 25 years old, it's more probable that you are a professional football player. And then, when you talk about the community in the ages before, right now, yes, it's a big issue for women to get accepted into society and get more opportunities. But 50 years ago, it was pretty normal for them to be at home. And 50 years from now, I think, hopefully, it will get better and better. But does that necessarily mean that we are biased right now at this moment, at this time? Or do you get what I mean? Because,
yeah,
you know, it's a dynamical system.
Yeah.
Yes, and it changes.
Yeah.
And I think if you pinpoint the time, everything is normal, because it is moving. And 50 years from now, we are not biased, because we are the most conscious beings right now.
Hopefully.
So 50 years from now, some other issues may be more important to us right now. So I don't agree that we are biased. That's what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. Because you know, we have some people, they are pinpointing the references for us, and based on those references, we say that, okay, I am biased this way or that way.
Yeah, and I would say in 50 years we are biased in another way.
Exactly.
There's one thing that we can chip in for you. This is really fascinating. I think it's from Harvard, might be MIT. There's an implicit bias test. You can go online. There's lots of them, and you can really learn a lot about yourself. And even if you think you're not a biased person, there's race and gender and things like this. And this is very eye-opening. But before we change the subject, Lisa has one little thing to add to this question, and then I know we have a question up here for the audience. So
yeah, only short. You can look it up on Google, like bias in thinking, Daniel Kahneman. There is a lot of research on different kinds of biases, like the in-group bias, out-group bias, and so on. So there is a lot of research. There are classifications. You can look it up. Thanks.
Hi. Definitely what you talk right now is important. Inductive bias, being cautious, trustworthiness, taking care about the data, preservability, and so on and so forth is true. And you put very much responsibility on the researchers and on the developers. And as one from those side, I can say, yes, we are truly trying to develop. The field is not static, it's constantly moving. There's plenty of research, especially for inductive bias and especially towards trustworthiness coming right now. But in all of your talks, I haven't saw or heard anything about responsibility, not only of the researcher, but also from the user. Why? Because examples that you provided, for example, with the cars, it was a responsibility of a driver not to fall asleep or paying his attention while driving. It's a responsibility of Twitter guys knowing that Twitter is kind of a toxic place and they were knowing which monster they're going to create. It's also responsibility of AVS and doctors of making the decision. AI so far at this moment of the time was never set as ultimate tool that's going to resolve all of your problems. Researchers are always saying it's a recommendation system. We're telling you what it can give you, but even we are not 100% sure. So why and where and how we're going to put the society to be responsible towards using the things as well?
great question.
From my side, that's very important. It wasn't in my talk because at first we need the acceptance of the society. They are afraid and they don't want to know more, or people wants to know more. They don't get the information or they don't understand it. I agree. The society is responsible, and also the society or the user has to look on all the informations. And I am as a tourist, I really look to all informations, and sometimes I need more time to read the informations. If I should click, I accept it or not. And my daughter hates us, my husband and me, because we say, no, you're not allowed to take these games. All the others have these games. So they are users with the thinking of responsibility. But you have to think the normal user. And I know it from medical criminal law. Most of them, they are going there to hospital. And I tell you then why I make this comparison. They are going there and the doctor said, you have to do this and this. You have to take this pill or you have to make this operation. They don't ask more. They say, okay, when you say it, it's okay. And the same, I have the feeling, maybe you all can tell me that I'm wrong. With AI, most of them don't know that they use AI in handies or so on. That's the one point. So when you don't know it, you cannot have responsibility. You need the knowledge. Knowledge is power. But without the knowledge that you know that is inside, then you also cannot be responsible for that, so to say. And as I said, as in hospitals, it's also with AI. Some of them don't want to know more; they only use it. And therefore, we have to give them more information with awareness raising. You also said we have the starting point, but I think we need more. And I think it's not, from my perspective, it's not the right thing from Google or whatever to say, I accept it after such a list. It's the same with pills. You don't read 15 pages in a small words. You have to have 5 or 6 important points that the people understand it, they look at it, they want to read something, and they need more time to read all the documentations. There must be the main points that they can understand it. And I think from that moment on, they also start to take more responsibility of these issues. So that's so to say, the legal, from a more or less legal perspective.
And to follow this up, we all use electricity. But any of us know particular from where this electricity comes. Do we know how does the power plant work? Do we need this knowledge to click on and off? So this is not exactly the same as the AI area right now, definitely, because as developers, we also don't know much. But at some moment, the analogy will be more or less dissimilar.
But would be?
Dissimilar. The analogy will be dissimilar, right?
Yes.
This is tricky. I think if there's one thing we learned from this whole evening, that is it's really tricky, and everything you try is a double-edged sword, and it's got to be a mutual effort. I think researchers are also working hard to educate people that they should be aware of these issues to start questioning it. And yeah, but I don't think there's a simple answer. But Julia's waving at me up the back, and I'm not sure how we're doing for time. Have we got time for one more? Or okay, we got something from Zoom up here.
We have a lot of questions left here on Zoom, but I think we might not be able to take all of them, but I will just forward one or two more. We have here from Joliana Shirley. I hope I spelled it right. She says, thank you speakers and organizers for a balanced and thoughtful discussion on ethical tech and AI. As was said, there are a plethora of examples of algorithmic bias and unethical, unintended consequences when data code is not thoughtfully chosen and developed. I'm curious if anyone on the panel might be able to point to examples where ethics is, in fact, actually considered and embedded in the algorithms used to fool industry. So it's about positive examples.
Difficult question. So I would say it's a positive. So usually you don't hear probably of the positive examples because they are decided not to be developed. Yeah, for example, if you think of the military, there is also very often discussed, yeah, should we use AI to identify the enemy or whatever? And if it's then decided against, it's maybe not that big in the news. So we don't hear if some requests like this are turned down.
Okay. Yudan from Unexpected Data asks, shouldn't we just be bold and decide to not track some specific type of data?
Yes. And this is happening a bit with the GDPR, but only in Europe. And sometimes there are still like ways to get through it, so to still do it. But in general, yes, we should not track all the data we get. And we also don't want that all our data is tracked.
I take one last one from Wolfram Wöss. It is to Lisa. Do you think that it would be interesting to establish some kind of feedback loop between measuring the quality of the training data and an AI algorithm in order to measure the cause and effect relationship to finally improve that AI system?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think this definitely hits the point. I think, as I said, initially data quality is an important topic, and especially in AI systems where we have a lot of training data, we also need more automated approaches to measure this data. And while existing research is a lot of rule-based or deals with measurement by domain experts, we also, in my team at JKU, we developed a program which is called DQ Meerkat, and it aims at data quality measurement with so-called reference data profiles. This is a more automated way that would also support AI systems, because of course, as we heard before, we need to detect systematic errors in the data, and we really want to integrate the knowledge on the data and the knowledge of the decisions. So how good are the decisions taken by the algorithm in our applications? For example, this would also support your point, Natalia, that the user is integrated because he or she knows then, okay, the decision, how reliable is it because of the underlying data and of the algorithm. And I think this would be really a key point. Also following up maybe to the positive example, this year on August at the MIT Chief Data Officer and Information Quality Symposium, where I also presented my tool, there was actually also a lot of discussion and ethics in AI, where they said, okay, the key is to really inform their users and also develop a measure of trust, which the user can then use.
Yeah, okay. I don't know about you guys, but I could keep on discussing this for a long time, but I think everyone's probably ready for a rest and a chat and a drink. So I think we have no more questions from Zoom, so I will invite Verena back to the stage to wrap everything up. And as she's coming on, please give another big thank you to our panelists.